Hello, welcome back to another video tutorial here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name is Gary Miller. Manny over in the Photoshop forum rendered this image and asked if he wanted to post-work it and include some building cables or electrical wires, those sort of things that you see here in the image. How would he go about doing that if he wanted to do it in post-work, and how would he also go about creating steam or smoke that rises up from the street, probably like what you see in New York with all those steam vents in the roadway. Well, this is his image that he submitted to me, and this is with the post-work effects that I've done. So this is what we're going to get started on. Let me ungroup that layer, take those and delete it. I'm going to hide that one because I'm going to use that one later. Okay, to begin with, when you look at this image, I don't think there is a single instance in this image where there is pure black that is displayed in here. I think we might come pretty close with a few of these little areas here, maybe the area on the roof of this old Camaro, but the image is pretty desaturated. There's not a lot of saturation in the colors, and it looks like there's a lot of haze in there. So I want to take that into account when I choose a color for my cables. I don't want it to be pure black. So I'm just going to sample an area here, and whenever I move my cursor outside of the color picker window, I can sample a color. It turns essentially into an eyedropper tool. So I'll sample there, click OK. Let me grab my brush here, and nope, that's not dark enough. So let's create it to be a little darker, and I'd say that's a pretty good blend with the existing blacks in the image. I'm happy with that. Okay, now what I want to do is resize my brush so I know what size I'm going to be making when working with when I make my cables. And it looks like for the size of this image, I want a pixel size, brush size, of 3. Okay, so my brush is all set up, and I've gone ahead and chosen a hard brush. To make the cables, I need to use my draw with pen tool. Now up here I have two options. I can draw a shape or I can draw a path. I want to draw a path. So just so that I know my points are straight, I'm going to bring down my ruler here. That way I can click here, and I know it'll be straight across there. So I'm going to do just that. Let me zoom out a little bit. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, but I'm going to hold it down because now I'm going to drag this control handle out and then release to create this nice arc here. Now, if over here in the path section, this is the path that I have created. So, still on my pen tool, I'm going to right-click on that path that I created and choose Stroke Path, which brings up this little window, and I can choose to stroke that path with any of the tools that I have. Well, I want to use my paintbrush. I don't want Simulate Pressure because that will taper down the ends of this cable. I want it to be a thick solid line, so I'm just going to choose OK, and it stroked the path with the brush. So in order to see our results, I'm going to delete our path, come back over here. I can clear that ruler selection or that guide that I created, and so here is our little cable. I suppose to get good results in blending it with your image, you'd want to use some layer styles. Probably start with bevel and emboss and play around with some of the settings. I found that for this particular application, I'm going to come up here to Windows and I'm going to choose Styles. Now the styles that I have loaded are web styles right here, and I want to use this one right here, which is Slick Chrome, and I'll close that back out. I'm going to zoom in here, and just by clicking on Slick Chrome, it went ahead and applied all these layer effects for me. But there's some I don't want. First off, I don't want stroke. I don't want to stroke it because that makes it too thick. And I know I don't want any drop shadow on it. So now that we've eliminated those two things, I want to adjust the lighting on this cable. So I'm going to play around with the placement of my light here. And it's just finding the right blend. And now I'll dial down the brightness. Okay, come to color overlay. It's already maxed out at black. Let's increase the shadow mode a little bit more. And I'd say got a little bit of highlight at the top, and the rest of it is that dark color black. Let me click off, and by golly, I'd say we've got a good blend there with the rest of the image. Well, I want to duplicate that layer, and I'll just use my arrow keys and nudge it down a little bit. Now when I click off, it's a little short, so I want to stretch that out. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, and I'll just stretch that out a little bit. Let me reposition that. And I will copy the first one. And let's move this one up a little bit. And this one could probably come down in size. Okay, except for their placement. Their placement needs a little adjusting. Except for that, they really blend very well with the rest of the image. But to save time, I'm just going to move on to the next project. Let me group these and put them all in a group here. I'm going to create another layer. Now what I want to do is I want to create a cable that comes here, starts here in the foreground and stretches down and comes all the way to back here in about the middle ground and attaches to that building. So I'm going to come back and grab my pin tool. I'm going to click out of bounds here. Then I'm going to come over here and click where I want it to attach, and I'm just going to drag this control handle out till I get an arch or a profile that I like. Alright, and the same as before, we're going to use our stroke with pen, but because this is, or stroke with brush, because this is in the foreground, I want my brush to be a little larger. And probably a little larger than that. Okay, so come back to my pen tool, and I'm going to stroke that path with the brush, and I will delete my path. I don't need that anymore. So there is our large cable. First thing I want to do is I want to taper down the end here. So I'm going to hit Control T, right click and choose Perspective, and I want to taper this end down considerably. And now I need to add some more bend to it, and if I do that, I can put some of that bend back in there, and it's still tapered. Not quite enough though, so let me taper it some more. I'm going to hit Control T, right click, and let's choose the distort, and let's see if we can pull this up and get that thickness, get that nice curve back into it. Let's move it back down. Okay. Let me click off. That's what I'm looking for. Now, I did spend quite a bit of time coming up with settings that work well for this, and I've got it right here on this layer right here. So rather than experiment, I'm just going to hold down my Alt key and drag that effects icon right over that new cable that I created, and this is the effect that it gives us. But because this is much larger than the previous one, I may need to make a few adjustments. And what I did on this one is, because it's in the foreground, I chose pattern overlay, and I have loaded the grayscale paper patterns, because that gives a kind of a neat little texture to it. So let's come in here and play with our bevels so that we can find something, make some adjustments to these settings so that it looks good. And let's see what happens if we change that to default. Find a setting here that looks realistic. I think I'll go back to that one, and maybe we can adjust our lighting. I don't want to use global lighting because it will affect the other ones. Let me cancel off of that. Now the lighting settings that I use only affect this one and not those other cables. Okay. Okay, I think we can lose the inner glow because that was adding a little bit too much. Bring up the highlights and find a sweet spot for this light. I hope maybe in the next update with Photoshop they do some enhancements with some of these layer styles, especially using this little thing. It's not the most responsive. There we are. Okay, let me dim that down a little bit. And let me click off. I think it could use a little bit more gray in it, so the color overlay, if I reduce that a bit, I should be able to get exactly what I want. So it's not quite so dark. There we are. Okay. I want to duplicate this. I'll hide my top one. With this one, I want to create a shadow with it. So it's hard to see, but right in here is the center point of this object. What I want to do is to drag that right over here to where it attaches to the building. Now I can use that as the center point for its rotation. And once you click off, you got to drag it back. And I think I'll drag it right there. Okay. I'm going to create a new layer, just a blank layer, and merge it with the one that I just maneuvered. Use my eraser brush, and I'm going to erase all of this area that I don't need. And I'll erase it right to there. I'll come up here to Filter, Blur, and I'll give a little bit of a Gaussian blur to that. And reduce its opacity. Now it looks like it's casting a shadow. Okay, just a few more steps and we'll be done. Create a new layer and come up here to my paintbrush tool. I think I'll choose a gray color. What I want to do is use my Wacom tablet. You can use a mouse for this too. It works almost as good. You'll just need to play a little bit more often with your brush size. I already have a brush set up for this. It's a smoke brush. And if I start painting, let me reduce my brush size. If I start painting, I can start making some steam and some smoke coming up out of the street or whatever source I choose. And that looks good, except I think I want, for this, I want it to be a little less saturated. And these are the brush settings that I have chosen. I have number 11 brush that I'm using. Because I'm using a Wacom tablet with a pressure sensitive pen, I have pen pressure enabled on all these settings. Scattering, these are the settings. Color dynamics, I want these two colors that I have chosen, I want them to both be used while I am making the steam or the smoke coming up. So that's why I have color dynamics enabled. And other dynamics, I have opacity jitter all the way up because it's controlled by my pen, as well as flow jitter. So I'm just going to choose a spot, and on a new layer I'm just going to start painting some smoke, some steam, whatever it is that would be coming up. And the paint engine, the brush engine that Photoshop has is really good. And let's create a new layer down here. Now this will be steam coming up, so I don't want brown in it. I'll just go straight with gray. And I guess coming right up here out of the street will make some steam coming up. And when you alternate between the fore and background color, the one that is chosen at the moment that is foreground will be predominantly displayed. So when I had the dark gray, I didn't have enough white in it, so that's why I switched and added a little bit more white instead of that darker gray. And that's probably a little too dark, so come up here to adjustments, and let's increase the brightness of this some. And that is steam, but I don't like the shape of it, so I'm just going to do another one. It's a little too much. It's almost like a big trash fire in the middle of the street. Probably need something a little bit more subtle. There we are. Give a little white to this. And I'll create a new layer. And let's say there's some coming up out of here. And out here in the distance, we have some more. And I will use my smoke brush for that because it already is loaded with the colors that I want. When you save a brush, it also asks if you want to save the colors that you currently have associated with it, and that's probably a little bit too thick. I want something a little bit more transparent. There we are. A little bit more subtle. I also did a tutorial on this. It was at GeekatPlay. It's Postworking the planet Mars, and in that I also do some of this. And for the sake of time, I'm going to stop it here because I have pretty much shown everything that you need to do. So this is Postworking an image, adding smoke or steam, as well as making cables that can stretch across the road. So let's group all this and turn it off and turn it back on. This is Postworking an image right here in Photoshop. You would probably want to duplicate these, rotate them so that they fall in the same line as the shadows in this scene, and use it to create shadows, because steam like this would create a very subtle little shadow in reality. And so that's it for this tutorial. I hope you can benefit from this. Thanks for watching here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Have a good day.